You don't really need a lot of material in order to study pronunciation, especially for an American English accent. But you do need some different approaches to get the most out of it. And so today I want to take a look at one sentence and just kind of show you some different things that you want to be paying attention to in order to achieve a more natural sound the next time that you speak in American English. Good morning, guys. Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to your daily American English pronunciation show, which is Wake Up American. We are here on the channel usually between the hours of 7 to 8 a.m. New York to make sure that you can get in your 5 to 10 minutes of practice for today. And to guide you in that process, there is me. Hi, my name's Geoff. It rhymes with breath. It's one of the 4 keys to a natural sound in American English, including placement, pitch, breath, trying to weaken your consonant sounds in order to strengthen your vowel sounds. And today we're going to be taking a look at a concept called especially contrast. And there's lots of different elements that you can use with this. So let's take a look at our example sentence. It's this here. I didn't know the trip was so long. I didn't know the trip was so long. So what are some ways that we can play around with this contrast wise? Well, one thing that we can do is we can take a look, for instance, at stress. One thing that I see a lot of students doing is they tend to add lots and lots of stresses into their sentences, and we end up with a rhythm that's not the most natural. To give you an example of this, if I'm saying this sentence stressing almost every word, it might sound something like this, like I didn't know the trip was so long. I'm like stressing everything there. So what you can do is start off by kind of exaggerating and stressing everything, and then gradually just start to take some of those stresses away. So that was a stress of everything. Let's take off the stress on didn't. So I didn't know the trip was so long. Let's maybe take the stress off of so. Like I didn't know the trip was so long. Let's take off a couple more stresses. Let's maybe just stress no and trip and long. Let's just stress those words. Like, I didn't know the trip was so long. Let's maybe take off another stress. Let's take off the stress on no. So, I didn't know the trip was so long. And let's maybe just stress one word now. Let's maybe just stress trip. I didn't know the trip was so long. I didn't know the trip was so long. See, that's a very different rhythm than where we started. So that's one element of contrast is that you can play around with what words get stressed and what words get reduced and try to see if you can arrive at a rhythm that sounds more natural. Another thing that you can do is you could play around with pitch. For instance, you could say this sentence all high, like, I didn't know the trip was so long. You could say this sentence all low. You could say, I didn't know the trip was so long. Or maybe you could start high and work your way down. Like, I didn't know the trip was so long. Or you could do the opposite, right? You could do low to high. Like, I didn't know the trip was so long. Very different there, right? So kind of playing around with the different pitches. Another way that you could approach this to play around with contrast is you could play around with speed. You could say the whole thing fast. I didn't know the trip was so long. You could say it slow. I didn't know the trip was so long. Okay, playing around with other things too, like pitch there. But again, notice that's a lot slower there. Or maybe you'll use a mix of both, maybe starting fast and then slowing down. So I know the trip was so long. Or the opposite, starting slow and then going fast. I didn't know the trip was so long. Differences there, right? You can also play around with an element of contrast I call firmness that we talked about on the channel before. So firm is like this, say everything firm. I didn't know the trip was so long. Or everything soft. I didn't know the trip was so long. Or a mix, starting firm then softening. I didn't know the trip was so long. Or maybe starting soft and then going firm. I didn't know the trip was so long. These are just examples of contrast here. And this is the thing that I'd like you to pay attention to when you talk, because when you or especially if you're doing shadowing. Shadowing, again, is like when you hear someone talking, you try to copy what they're doing. This is important in shadowing because I promise you, when you listen to native speakers talking, they're using all of these different tools. They're going fast on some parts, they're going slow on other parts, they're raising their pitch, they're lowering it, and things like that. So we want to start paying attention to what are native speakers actually doing in their own speech, and are you getting all of it? Because I think for a lot of students, what are we paying attention to? We're paying attention to maybe individual sounds. We're paying attention to pronunciation like vowels or consonants or maybe linking, when in reality, there's so many other factors that are at play here, like the pitch, like the speed, like the breath, like the firmness, like the softness. So we want to start paying attention to that in the speech of the people we listen to. They copy it. All right, guys, like I said, these are elements that we've talked about before. If you want, especially some practice with pitch, I'm going to link a workout video that we made that specifically targets pitch. But I do want to thank you for hanging out with me. There's a lot of pronunciation resources out there, so the fact that you spent some time here is appreciated. I will see you all later. Hope you guys